Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Impact Policy Podcast. My name is Sam Johnson. You probably recognise that I'm a long way from country, from our studio on Gadigal country here in Sydney. And I've got the privilege today to be down here in Canberra on Ngunnawal. I want to take a moment to acknowledge country, pay my deepest respects to the elders here, both past and present. Thank them for keeping me safe on my journey down here early this morning, and for being able to hold this space here with Sis. I've got Dixie Crawford here, a staunch woman who probably needs little introduction in terms of the impact that she's having in this world and in this space that we'll be yarning about here today. So thank you so much for coming here today, spending a bit of time together, and I might give you a moment to tell the community who you are, where you're from, and what you're doing.
What I do.
What we're here today to yarn about.
So thanks for having me, Sam. And I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this country, the Ngunnawal people, and also pay my respects to families and kinship that have connection to the ACT region. I'm a visitor on this country, and I've been living here for about 3 years now. I'm a Barkindji woman from a place called Brewarrina in far western New South Wales. And yeah, I run a business. My business is called Ngunya, and that word in Barkindji language means firelighter, which is probably a bit reflective of the work that I do with organisations. My nickname is Cyclone, probably also tells you a little bit about me and how it is that I go about the work that I do and just actually live my life, right? Fly in, fly out, do what I need to do, make an impact, and then hopefully see that legacy live on in organisations, and hopefully try to change the narrative and have different conversations about outcomes that our people experience in this country.
Unreal. It's amazing to get to share some space with you. We've known each other for a little while now.
I was thinking about this. We've actually never met.
Never met in person.
Never met in person, but we've been yarning. How long have you been in business for now?
This will be my second year in July.
Is it really only 2 years?
Yeah.
Gee, I feel like we've known each other for longer than that, you know?
Well, that's mob, right?
We just connect, eh?
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, I was thinking that too. It's the first time face to face in the flesh, and it's really valuable. We get to hold this space, you know, because I think I posted coming down here. You know, you're a LinkedIn top voice. You've got a big influence.
You always say that to me.
Big influence in this space. Hey, not everyone got that title, that privilege. So you obviously have a sphere of influence in that professional realm in terms of the impact that you're having with the work that you're doing. And you've been around for how many years?
6 years next month.
Which is, it's a bit of time, right? But it's not like you haven't been around for 20, 30 years doing this work. So in a lot of ways, having a massive impact in a pretty relatively shorter space of time, but obviously enough to really build up a reputation of delivering and providing value and insight and knowledge too. So really excited to be able to have this yarn and go deep, because I know people will be watching and listening that want to understand more about your experience, more about lessons you've learned. You've got your own podcast that you've hosted, the Roadmap to Reconciliation.
Yeah,
that's the one. Check it out if you want to dive a bit more deeper into Dixie's
and give
work.
it a review, because it's deadly.
That's it. Like and subscribe. And so
share with your friends.
Yeah, that's it. And so to be able to have this space to be able to dive deeper around this stuff, is really valuable for us. And so maybe a good space for us to start is, it's been 5-6 years. You've been on your own journey in terms of the Ngunya and everything that you've been doing. Can you sort of talk to us? People know that you're in the reconciliation space. Do you want to maybe take us on to a bit of a reflection in terms of, I guess, the biggest things you've seen over the last sort of 5 years in terms of the reconciliation journey? And I guess where to from here when you think about Ngunya, yourself, but also like what reconciliation means and what people listening really need to sort of know and understand to have an impact.
Yeah, I think reconciliation has certainly evolved from my time prior to operating a business to then starting out in business, and then 6 years down the track, the landscape has changed dramatically from a political standpoint, but also what strategically within organisations where there is an emphasis on impact and there is sometimes a focus on having a strategic direction purely for the social clout or the economic benefits of having a reconciliation action plan is. And like them or love them, RAPs are here to stay. I think there is a real need for RAPs to evolve, and I think they are evolving, and that has probably accelerated in the last 8 months, being pre and post referendum in this country, because what we're recognising is that we need to have a different conversation about the outcomes that government and corporates are achieving, or the initiatives that they're contributing to that actually drive better outcomes in communities from a housing, health, education, employment, economic development perspective. And if we don't have robust, transparent and realistic conversations about what are the practical and tangible initiatives that we can put into play that actually do achieve the goal that we are saying, then we aren't going to be moving the needle towards better lived experiences for our people in this country. And we are just going to be continuously on this hamster wheel, which really, from my perspective, my first job in the public sector was 20 years ago when I was 17. I first was a dental assistant, and then I moved into mental health, and I was working in an inpatient unit, and I worked in child and adolescent mental health, community health, drug and alcohol, and my career kind of progressed from there into working with facts and health and paediatrics and all of those different spaces. But some of the conversations that I was exposed to 20 years ago are still occurring now, and I'm absolutely certain that people that have got a career of spanning more than 40 or 50 years would be saying that we're still having very similar thematic conversations about what was occurring for mob back then, and we've invested a significant amount of money and still not actually seen outcomes. I mean, the Productivity Commission recently released that report saying that, in fact, of the 19 closing the gap targets that do exist, we're only on track for a few. And that's alarming. It's concerning. In fact, it's shameful. Like, what are we actually doing? And so the work that I'm trying to do with my clients that engage me around RAPs is to think bigger picture, right? To think broader than what that initiative outcome being of having an Aboriginal employment strategy. Well, creating career pathways, recruiting and retaining First Nations talent creates opportunities for people to have careers. And when people have long-lasting careers and they're progressing down the line, they create economic stability and prosperity within their own families, which means that we're creating opportunities for people to go and get medication when someone is sick, or we're able to travel for sorry business when that occurs, or we're able to buy our own homes. Like, some of the basic needs that communities have are sometimes not being met because we are not seeing the bigger picture. We're just seeing a tiny piece of the puzzle, or a tiny piece of the issue that we want to see or that we think we can contribute to, when actually there's a whole lot of other information and a whole lot of other opportunity that we can be the catalyst for change with.
Mm-hmm. I was listening on the way down here this morning, I was listening to your yarn about...
was this before or after you put a blowout in your trousers?
Before I split my pants on the highway, taking a leak. It was before then, actually, and the sun was still down. And you were talking about how, you start with RAPs, but often where a lot of them can fall off is after they've been launched in the implementation phase, and where, you really need that leadership and that buy-in and that commitment and that budget and resourcing to achieve the goals and the actions that are there to be seen. And so I just wanted to touch on that with you, because I thought it'd be a good point in terms of really trying to understand, like, what does that actually mean? And for people listening, like, what do you have to be really mindful of? Because I guess when I was listening to that, it made me immediately think of experiences where people had come to me they had done a RAP, and within the RAP it had different actions, and then they'd come to us with a deliverable that they wanted support with, but with little to no budget to achieve that.
I love that line.
Yeah.
Don't give me that line, because I ain't playing that game.
Exactly right. So can you talk to us about what when people are listening, thinking about the reconciliation journey, how do they understand this life cycle? What does it mean? What are the ingredients that they need to actually meaningfully achieve what they're setting out to say that they want to get to?
Yeah. I think the first place to start is, what is your organisation's understanding of what reconciliation is. How does it align or contribute to our core business? And do we have the right people leadership, governance structure and resources available to us to implement it? Now, a lot of organisations will start a RAP. Not every organisation will finish one. And you can well and truly go and look on the Reconciliation Australia website and you will see a significant number of organisations on Reflect, which is the first level of the RAP framework. And the number gets smaller and smaller as time goes on. And I think post Black Lives Matter in 2020 or 2021, whenever that occurred, you know, like there were two critical things that happened, you know, in that space, COVID and then also Black Lives Matter. And I saw a lot of organisations running out to get a RAP because what the motivator for that, and this is my opinion and I still stand by it, I'm dying on the hill with this opinion, is that organisations and leaders didn't necessarily want a RAP, but they didn't want to be seen as though they weren't an ally or they weren't being an anti-racist and they weren't demonstrating commitment to the principles around diversity and inclusion and equity. And so we saw this significant number of organisations that had a RAP, Reflect RAP, and then they just fell away. And so the two core reasons I think that occurred is that people didn't understand the purpose of the RAP and they didn't understand what their individual purpose or vision or goal for having a RAP would be. And it's not necessarily about and, you know, Reflect is the first level. And, you know, in some respects, it's the bare minimum framework that I think is almost a bit of a testing lesson over a 12-month period. That's how long that the Reflect goes for. And it's really about probably having honest conversations about where we are as a team, where we are from a people culture perspective and where we are from a relationship-based perspective with First Nations communities and willingness to recognise that there's different worldviews and lived experiences that are sitting right alongside the one that we have right now.
Totally.
And so without that purpose, we're not understanding a story of our why. And without that why, then leadership teams aren't able to one, form that perspective themselves, but then also demonstrate it, right? And so we talk about, we're committed to X, you know, whatever values, right? We're committed to transparency and diversity, inclusion and cultural respect and all these things. Values are not to be spoken about. Values are to be demonstrated. And I think that the reason a lot of RAPs fall apart is because leaders don't necessarily understand what they're doing, let alone why they're doing it. And if you don't understand what and why, there's no way you're going to get the how right. And this is the thing that falls apart, right? It's like when I work with some organisations, I really am the big bad wolf, right? Because they've built their house on this straw, right? And I can come along and huff and puff and blow it down, right? Because I can ask 2 or 3 questions and find lots of holes in your story. And you know what mob are like, right?
Totally.
Like mob will pick you apart like a ham on a pair of pants if you don't do this work right. So if you don't understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and essentially how you're doing it, then that's reflective of really poor transactional, tokenistic leadership that looks more at the visibility metrics of allyship versus the actual meaningful leadership that enables change in companies.
Yeah, well said. If people were listening, have you got like I often find like for me, I always learn by being able to see an example, and you know, like keeping it the organisational business anonymous. But like, can you share an example in practice of where you've seen a RAP be developed well, but also progress well, and be implemented well, and can you describe that and what that looks like?
I think I can't tell you a best practice example of an organisation because I think that every organisation has strengths and they have weaknesses and then they have areas of improvement. I can tell you some examples about organisations that do a particular deliverable or an action item really well. And I can tell you certainly some examples about some very poxy leadership or toxic, combination between poxy and toxic, right? Some toxic leadership where things just go incredibly wrong because people haven't slowed down. They haven't done their individual critical self-reflection, let alone taken stock of where we are as a business and what it is exactly that we want to contribute to and why. So I think some organisations if we were to look at the procurement, so there's 4 pillars in a RAP: respect, relationships, opportunities, and governance. And so the opportunities section looks at employment, procurement, and educational outcomes. And the 2 main factors sitting there are procurement and employment opportunities, which essentially links to those closing the gap initiatives around economic prosperity and opportunities around economic independence. And when you have money, things eventually become a little bit easier for you, right? Like there are a lot of our communities that are really struggling to, rub 2 cents together, unfortunately. And there's a lot of with that becomes, being, below the line of poverty, like you and I have been there, we know what that's like.
Struggle.
We definitely been there.
Same.
And it's those opportunities that organisations create between with employment are really great in terms of not just having entry-level traineeship, apprenticeship positions or, administrator roles, but actually creating employment and career pathways for people to transition into middle management, senior leadership and essentially executive leadership roles within an organisation. So there are some organisations that I know that have started with no Aboriginal staff to then all of a sudden waking up to 10 years down the track with having, close to 100 employees in the organisation where, 15% of their senior leadership team is Aboriginal, right?
Wow.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge for organisations is that when they're progressing with their RAP is that they want short-term wins because once again people
I'm right in 10 years as you say that.
Yeah. It's but the thing is, right, is that those organisations slowed down. They took their time. They worked out what they needed to do. And if I'm to be honest, that was probably led by the coup of this organisation so I've been working with this organisation for about 4 years now, and it was one of my first RAP clients actually. And they're only on Stretch actually. That organisation recently transitioned into Stretch, that company, but the coup had been really committed. So he'd been around this company for about 12 or 14 years, I think, and he has a really good understanding that cultural change within an organisation takes time. And I think the biggest problem that a lot of organisations experience is that they want the short-term wins because they want to look like they're doing something versus actually doing those 1%ers, right? And so rather than where you're racing to, I don't get it, right? We're not running to the finish line. There is no finish line when we talk about opportunity and change and sustainability and real impactful leadership. Totally. And so I think organisations that don't let yourself off the hook, right? By saying, okay, cool, our focus is to employ 5 new Aboriginal people into the organisation and retain them over this next 12 months and hopefully recruit another 5 in the following year, right? I wouldn't limit yourself to those opportunities, but those numbers. I would really think about where there are opportunities for us to do real work that actually makes a difference. And I think organisations that think beyond the numbers that sit in front of them and see the bigger picture, those are the ones that make a change, And I've got other organisations that I've worked with that have their supply chain, is upwards of $100 million to First Nations businesses across the country. And so when you buy from Black businesses, you're usually buying from a company that's got more blackfellas employed in it, or they've got a supply chain of blackfellas they're working with as well. So I think the success is really hinged on you seeing the unlimitless potential of a business and how your legacy can live on and what you can start versus what you can finish. And I think organisations are much more focused on the traffic light system of red, we've failed, or we haven't done it, or green, we have done it. And I think focusing more on the amber about it being ongoing and we're progressing is the difference between the organisations that really do have a meaningful impact in our communities.
Yeah, I think you really articulate that really well, like when you talk about some organisations that are looking for a bit of a quick win, or you talked about that sort of Black Lives Matter COVID sort of era where everyone was looking for to be seen as visibly doing something. RAPs almost became like a stamp, but
like the Australian Made stamp, right?
Yeah, totally.
You'd be like Ally approved.
Yeah, like a B Corp certification or something, But I think what you're talking about, that long term, that 10 years I wrote down as you're talking in terms of that organisation having a significant impact, it's about like people, organisations listening that want to be champions for this sort of stuff, understanding that like there is no like the road to reconciliation, there is no sort of finish line.
Yeah.
In terms of where we're going, it's a reconciliation is the repairing of past relationships, failed relationships. Loosely sort of paraphrasing there, but that's not something that's achieved in a short space of time. And so talking about some of that significant stuff around not just building standalone recruitment programs, but actually investing in the development of a pipeline for people to come in and progress through your organisation, understanding that that's something that when you start to embed that, you're really taking your organisation on a cultural shift in terms of what employment and engagement looks like internally. I think you really, really pulled that together really nicely. So for people listening in terms of, so that's some of the strengths that you've seen and some of the examples of where you've seen that going really well. What are some of the examples that people could hear about, like just classic don'ts? And where you've seen,
I've got a list prepared, Sam. Look, I've seen lots of really bad, poor practice. There have been a lot of things that I've seen as a RAP consultant. That's all I do really with my business is that I just work on reconciliation plans every single day. One, I love them, and I really do believe in the concept of rebuilding relationships. After we have acknowledged and recognised the impact of colonialism in this country, not in the historical context of colonisation, but in the present moment of recognising that there are so many political experiences that shape social outcomes and community well-being that cannot no longer be ignored. And I think it's been a choice of the broader community to choose when they can and won't engage, or even what their perception of these social experiences are because of purely because of political experiences that are based upon our race, right? We have been treated a certain way because we are Black people.
100%.
So I think some of the bad practices that I've seen, in some circumstances I've given people full refunds and just said, your organisation is not for me, when I've really thought they're just, you're not ready. Quite disrespectful in terms of, I can rumble with the best of them, right? Like
I bet.
I can have tough conversations, and I can negotiate and navigate complexities and conflict and all of those type of things really well. But what I will not tolerate is disrespect. And some of the fundamental, if you look at those pillars, right, relationships is the number one thing, in respect. And there will be times where I've had clients that didn't continue to be clients, that are consistently speaking over the top of me. Clients that will tell me to say, just get stuff done. Or there are times where the actual, champion of the RAP is a senior leader in the organisation, but their EA or someone else much, much junior to them is doing all the project management, and they've farmed off essentially the responsibility. And RAPs, the culture that sits around a RAP is really about a personal journey of leadership and recognising where there's cultural differences, but also where there's opportunities for us to connect as humans. And so there is that lack of responsibility, which makes a RAP fail. There's also the treatment of some First Nations people in the RAP process, where there's a power dynamic that consistently plays out. So we were talking earlier about the power dynamic that exists for mob when you are one out in an organisation.
Yep.
And, the CEO or someone senior comes and asks you for advice, and you tell them all of this information, and then they choose to take it, or they don't take it, or they choose to take some of it and not all of the information. So the power dynamic definitely plays out, where we can consistently feel disempowered and devalued and somewhat disrespected and put in our place, so to speak, about strategic planning and implementation within an organisation. I've seen blatant racism. There was this one time where I was about to do, so when an organisation engages me, I run a RAP strategy session, and it's really I prepare people for what the conversations are about to unfold in their business, because lurking in the shadows of their company is racism, and they're not aware of that, right? And so I prepare organisations for that, for those conversations, and how you effectively facilitate conversations about racism and reconciliation. But when I was about to have this wrap strategy session, I just stood up and I was about to start, and one of the senior leaders of this organisation had said, "Okay, monkey dance for us."
What? What did you do?
I just packed my laptop up and I said nothing, actually, because I just left that room.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty, like, what could I say? I'm not going to stand there and argue with someone, and no one else was going to back me up. This is, a guy at the top of the food chain.
Wow.
No one's going to challenge him, like he was the big dog, right?
Yeah.
No one's going to challenge him or call him out on that.
Yeah, wow.
And so I just left the organisation, left the meeting room, never went back. And, so there's blatant racism that really does come to the top for organisations when they're not ready. And so this is why it's really important for organisations to move at the pace of trust, not just for their organisation, but for the sake of communities, in terms of when you invite people into your house. It's like when I invite someone over to my house, I'm making sure my house is clean, right? It's not to say my house is perfect and you don't open the door and a whole heap of shit's going to fall out, right? But it's to say that the fundamentals here are right. There are definitely some leaks and some things some cracks in the company that we need to fix, but not everything is hunky-dory. And I think there's organisations that are like, look at all the shiny things over here that we're doing with our beautiful artwork, or our employment strategy, or our $25 million on procurement. It's what sits underneath that is very telling about who the people are of an organisation, where they currently are and where it is that they want to be, or where it is that they don't want to be, right? There are people that just don't care about mob in this country. Yeah. Totally fine, right? Like, we can clearly see that as a result of the referendum, right? Definitely. And it's not my job to bring organisations along to a finish line, or, or to be progressing if they don't want to be. Like, I don't have the time or the energy for that. Like, it's tough holding conversations with people where, when you go into a meeting, sometimes you don't know what you're going to hear, right? And we automatically, we're already on not the defense, but we're, what's that word, like hyper alert, right? Yeah. Like, we're being really mindful about what are people saying? What did they mean when they say that? What's their body language looking like? What are they thinking about me? Like, when you're one out in the room and you're holding space and you're having these yarns, it can be tricky. Definitely. And then sometimes you get called a monkey, right, in the room. And so, like, those experiences inform my, fear and my anxiety sometimes about going into rooms, because I'm really not sure what's about to come out of someone's mouth in that space. So I think...
How long ago was that?
When was that? Last year. So
it was pretty recent.
Yeah, it was last year. So.
Last year, in the height of everything happening last year as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and it's funny, a couple of years before that too, someone spat in my face on Australia Day.
Yeah, wow.
It's just, it's, and not like a little, like a proper slag, and I'm like, what country do we live in here? It's very...
How do you project as someone, both within LinkedIn and in the real world, as very staunch? Very, very strong.
Yeah, but I'm also a 5'1" woman.
Yeah, right? I know. Like,
I'm not going to...
small in stature.
I pick my battles, right? Like, I'll know when I can have a conversation, but one of the, violence against women in this country is consistently perpetrated every single day, right? A woman is losing her life every 3 days. And one of the things that I do is pick and choose when I can engage in a conversation and when I need to walk away, you know. When in this country, women can't even go for a run without someone thinking they have the right to murder her, and so recently I've stopped running because I actually fear for my life of going for a run, because I don't know if someone thinks that they have the right to simply take that from me because I'm on my own running along a street in the afternoon. Like, if I go for a run now, it's running around an area where I know there are lots of people in daylight. Right? So I pick and choose when I will have those conversations. So that day that someone spat in my face, I knew that I could not stand there and, stand my ground. I got in my car and drove away because that was the safest thing that I needed to do. So when I get into conversations like that, or an interaction is about to occur around racism that has the potential to escalate, I make a very informed decision about my safety, my immediate physical and psychological safety. And I can go have a conversation with my family, my psychologist. I can get support to unpack racism. I don't want to go to a hospital in a situation because I've stood up to someone and then all of a sudden they've decked me. And that's the reality of this, right? So I pick and choose my battles purely based upon the risk management of physical safety, in all honesty, Sam. Like, that's the reality of it. How
has that shaped, sorry, I didn't cut you off.
No, go on.
How has that shaped who you are professionally and personally today, having to operate within that world, within that worldview, within that lived experience?
It's probably given me a lot more. It's given me a lot more perspective about things, and I'm very picky about who it is that I will work with and who I won't work with. I have a very clear guideline that there has to be value alignment, and if I really believe in the mission and the vision that you have for an organisation, then I'll work with you. But if I think that it's a lot of the work is it's driven by visibility metrics, or it's driven by the sake of just having something, then I will tap out of that. But I construct conversations in a really those tricky conversations. I really adjust my communication style. So I'll sit there and I'll have open body language, because sometimes people don't want to have a conversation about racism, right?
Absolutely.
People don't want to. If someone says something racist or that is discriminating against mob, they don't want to get picked up on something, right? Or even when it comes down to sexism or any form of discrimination, right? Australians just don't want to be told that they're wrong with something, right? They don't want to be picked up, and they feel like they're being humiliated, like they're being put on show, they're being criticised. So I'm very selective about how I navigate these conversations and how I approach them in the least intrusive way, so we can deconstruct the issue rather than criticise the person. And this is what I think has to happen in this country in order for us to move forward, particularly from a cultural capability training perspective, is to focus on the issue rather than the people. And we tend to personalise a lot of systemic issues in this country. And they are personal for us, right? They're personal for us, but also because, our mob are discharging against medical advice, right? And then representing to an emergency department where a completely preventable condition is putting them on the deathbed, right? We are seeing those things happen. So that it is personal for us, but we can actually attack the problem versus the person. And I think that's what we need to focus on in order to have impact in this country.
It was pretty clear and pretty evident that you've been able to take so much of that experience of what is the reality for being a black woman in this country, and being a black woman and a professional navigating this world, and taking that experience and being able to be able to understand and use that to continue to have an impact that you're having. And I think it's a testament to your resilience and strength and your staunchness around who you are as a woman and as a person. And I think it's just sitting here as another black fella, but as a man, as someone who's read by the world as white, my experience is very different to yours, and will never have experienced half.
Well, if someone starts with you, you're going to put them to sleep, right?
Well, they will go very quickly. But my privilege that I live within is that I'm read very different down your read, and I'm very conscious of that.
Yeah.
And I think many people that are watching or listening to this can maybe take a moment to reflect on their privilege as well.
Well, just recognise, what you have access to and how powerful you can be in a particular situation, I know this might sound like I'm big noting, but I do recognise that I have this ability to be able to alter my communication style to the audience that I'm sitting in and be quite captivating with some key messages. And I think that for leaders in organisations that have RAPs, I want you to recognise the complete position of power, control and influence, and not in control in being that power dynamic, but I want you to recognise that you can set a standard. Right? Like there is an opportunity for you to set a new standard based upon this new information and alternative ideas and perspectives that are consistently shared with you as a leader. And you can lead in a way that actually does make a change versus just being the leader that says, okay, we're going to have a RAP and we're celebrating First Nations people, communities, cultures and histories in Rec Week or NAIDOC Week, right? Like go beyond what's sitting in front of you and think about, well, what's a legacy that I want to leave as a leader? How do I want to enable my people to be the best versions of themselves, whether it's in people and culture, in employment, in procurement, in HR, wherever it might be. Think beyond how it is that you're enabling your people to be the best versions of themselves as a culturally capable, consciously aware change agent that has the potential to influence different conversations that occur in our communities, because there are things that people say in backyard barbecues, in tea rooms, and they're completely racist, right? But we don't know how to have those conversations, and it is a leader that has to go first. So if there is an opportunity for you as a leader to go first, I really want you to be smart and not to lean into and to be courageous in that, right? Like think about, well, I don't know everything. What more do I need to know at this point, and what can I share from a vulnerability perspective to do my own listening and learning, but also to give permission to my staff to be vulnerable and to do their own learning and leadership, right? Because the critical point of RAPs is that there are key lessons here if you want to learn them at every single point. Every single point there's a lesson for us. So I think recognising the complete power and influence that you have is critical.
I think that's really, really valuable for many senior leaders that are listening to reflect on. As you were talking, I was thinking a lot about like our relationship as professionals in this space for organisations, whether it be we do a little bit of stuff in cultural capability with senior leaders. I know you do as well, and you do a lot of stuff in the RAP space. But I think about like, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the RAP space, you've said that ideally it shouldn't be transactional, should be relational. And I often think about best practice for the RAP world would be for an organisation to be like, we recognise we've got to go on a reconciliation journey. And so we need to engage, someone like yourself to do that and to really understand that it's an investment in a relationship and a journey together over a significant period of time. Because we see, many different areas of business and work where that's how business is done.
Yeah.
You think that
it's a commercial.
Exactly.
It's a commercial agreement, right? And I get that.
Yeah. And so, whereas I think where the wheels fall off, and we will touch on that, is the implementation stuff. So it's like, I feel like a lot of there's this appetite for the RAP and the development of the RAP. And it's almost like we think about the RAP separate to the implementation of what's in it. And then that's where it comes back to what you talked about before with that one black fella that's working within an organisation being one out, and then it falls on their shoulders to be the person that's trying to implement what's inside the RAP. Whereas really, like the expertise and the value is within someone like yourself and Neganya as an organisation, partnering with a business to go on that journey together, and then to be with them to navigate that implementation journey. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Have you ever seen that or anything like that?
That's something I prepared earlier. Well, that's what, it's interesting because like with your business, right? You always learn the same way that I encourage organisations to learn and to find their own style. Adapting to change and opportunities within the organisation around what we can do and what we shouldn't do, and if this is the right time or if this is the wrong time for something, and when we should, I guess making an informed decision about what you should do next. And so, when I first started working on RAPs 6 years ago, the only thing that I was doing was working with organisations on the development of the content and moving forward with companies to get it through the RA, to help them develop the content, the governance structure, look at their implementation plan, how it is that you put, what deliverables you should put where based upon what resources we've got, also what's being anticipated from an operational point of view, right? Like, are we going to go through a restructure in the next, 6 months? All of those different type of things, right? And so I was only working on that stage of development and in reflect. And as time has gone on, and I've recognised that actually my role as a Black woman, but also as a very skilled consultant, is to build capacity of organisations over a longer period of time. So I only worked in Reflect, and now I work in Reflect and Innovate. And my Innovate clients were my original Reflect clients, and we've got this long-term relationship. And the relationships that I'm having with the conversations I'm having with my clients now in Innovate, we're very strong, right? And because we have built a really strong foundation to the work that we did pre-Reflect RAP, endorsement, implementation of Reflect, and now we're transitioning from launch of Innovate into implementation of Innovate. So I think what's really critical is for organisations, and I think there's a bit of a trend in the market, to be honest, with clients, that they're recognising that anyone can write a RAP, and that's the truth, right? Anyone can write a RAP.
Totally.
But I do encourage people to engage with First Nations consultants in particular, because there are just the nuances of our lived experiences that you will never understand.
Absolutely.
Right? You can listen to us, but you can never understand it. And there's no point having a document about Aboriginal people without Aboriginal people, right? And so I think as time has gone on, I've been more focused on implementation with organisations now, because I want to build the capacity of organisations, and I want to actually be a part of your business that is working on people, culture, and the standard of practice. And I can't do that outside of the tent. Right? Like, I need to be in here with your leadership team, shoulder to shoulder, understanding the conversations that are occurring, understanding what our challenges are, and going deep into the problem solving of that, right? Like, what are the risks that are occurring for us now? And then what strategies can we put in place to either be responding to that risk and that issue that's occurred, or how do we mitigate those risks as they come along, right, for us as an organisation? So I've definitely as a consultant, moved past development, and I'm doing both now, development and implementation consulting, more so, and I guess also in the leadership development coaching space for executives, versus just helping people write the document, come to a few RAP working group meetings, because if we're not changing and we're not evolving, I've also not done my job, right? Yeah. That conversation needs to occur and it needs to mature. And if it's not maturing and it's not changing, then I've not been effective, but also the leadership team has not been effective, and we just haven't been fed income, right? We're just basically taking the piss. Everyone's taking the piss, right?
Totally.
And so I think organisations need to start investing in planning for implementation, because there's a red flag for your team if your RAP group has no black fellows that are in a decision-making position. Then you've got an issue, and Mob will back me up on that, right? Because they might be one out in a RAP working group, and at the end of the day, you're contributing to ideas and to concepts and giving advice, and then someone will pick and choose whenever it is that they want to take it. And usually the chair, to be honest, 9 times out of 10, the chair or the head of the RAP group is a white person, and that's fine. But you need a co-chair, and that co-chair needs to be black.
That's it.
Right? And that co-chair, that black co-chair, needs to have equal amount of presence and influence in your RAP work, not just in your RAP working group, but within the organisation. And you've got to start sharing that power. And sometimes organisations are not prepared to share that power and that control.
Totally. Would you say, based on your journey and your experience now, and saying that you've moved beyond development into implementation, would you say best practice, like for businesses, organisations, leaders listening that want to start to move into this space, would you say best practice is engaging around that sort of life cycle? So what I'm trying to say is, if someone was listening and they wanted to engage yourself or an organisation similar to you, should they be prepared to be able to not just be having conversations around like, I just want to develop a wrap, and be prepared for we want support for development and implementation as part of the same piece of work?
Yeah. So when I work with organisations now, it's for a minimum 6 months. So I say it will take somewhere between 12 and 16 weeks for a wrap to be approved and to be endorsed by RA, from the development, from the wrap strategy session all the way to the final endorsement and, beautifully designed, strategic document that you've got. I say there's about 16 weeks, and in that period of time, I attend all your wrap working group meetings, which are either every 3 weeks or every month. I kind of have some conditions, in all honesty, about the engagement because I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I understand that you know what your business is and how things operate. I know what makes it work with a wrap, and I have a strong framework and a very clear framework that I know what works, and my clients know that works because we get really good outcomes working together. But we're not going to achieve that by simply doing the development and then you coming back to me in 12 months' time saying, can we have a review or can you work with us on Innovate? Yeah. I haven't taken on a client that isn't development and implementation for, I think, 2 years now. I've worked with most organisations that are only on development and implementation because I just don't see the purpose of an engagement or a relationship. The 12 weeks, that's a commercial agreement from as far as I'm concerned, and that doesn't sit well with me, and my grandmother would growl at me because once you know better, you do better, right? And I know better that I know now that the best practice and the best impact that I can make for organisations in order to better understand and meet the needs and aspirations of our communities is for you to work with me for the 12 weeks or 16 weeks it takes to develop the wrap, but then another 3 months beyond that, because it takes time to build the relationships. It takes time to work out where the pressure points are for the organisation. It takes time to recognise where there's limitations. It takes time to understand. In fact, the CEO is having a complete meltdown because he's worried he's going to say something wrong, or she's worried that she's going to offend someone, right? You don't learn that overnight by just meeting with someone once. So the engagement with me now is all about development and implementation. And again, my job is about building your capacity as a leadership team, because a wrap is a strategic direction in an organisation that has profound potential around people culture, improvement, not just within the organisation, but more broadly in the community, right? So if we ask people to actively participate in cultural capability training, then that information disseminates out into communities, right? If it's the right cultural awareness training, if it's the right cultural capability training that hits the mark, then your people in your organisation who are being encouraged to call out racism or to critique racism in a conversation, those people are then able to have that conversation at the dinner table with their brother-in-law who might say something wrong, right? And so then that person, your staff member, who you think is only your staff member, right, who is actually a person, and all these other commitments outside of that, right, his mum, auntie, cousin, daughter, they're able to sit at the dinner table and say to their brother-in-law, hey, Darren, what do you mean when you say X, Y, Z? Help me understand this, right? And so being able to present new information and provide a skill set to staff means that you potentially are creating this generation of conscious leaders and champions in and outside of the workplace that can drive community change.
Absolutely. I think that's really critical, hey, in terms of that generational change more broadly and the impact that we can have. With the implementation stuff, I think one of the things that is really valuable about organisations and businesses understanding that as best practice in terms of that engagement for reconciliation as a journey is, like I've seen it, I'm sure you've seen it, is working in organisations and there's just one black fella that's responsible for trying to drive the implementation of the wrap.
And they stress us right out, eh?
Yeah, and they're burning out and
underpaid
and juggling a workload of anything with a capital A, they're going to be fucking managing.
Yep.
And I really see the impact of like that thinking about thinking about it as delivery and implementation as one project, one contract, one piece of work. It really also for organisations minimises the risk of burning out the few, if any, black staff you might have internally, because we know that if we want to achieve meaningful change, it is a significant investment. But I could see the value and impact of people like yourself, them being able to be there post-design for implementation, mentoring black staff within the organisation about that might be their first time in the reconciliation space. So being able to mentor them or guide them in terms of, all right, well, here's employment pathways we could consider in terms of achieving X, Y, and Z. Or, let's look at how we can design some senior leadership mentoring that can achieve this level of whatever. But yeah, everything you talk to really reinforces what we're sort of seeing now as best practice. Like you said, anyone can produce a yarn. Anyone can produce a wrap. But yeah, I think that's really sort of significant there.
Well, you'll know the difference between I can quite easily tell the difference between an organisation that's got really good, robust advice and respected the advice from blackfellas, because you can hear it in what people say, you can see it in what they do, and it's actually a part of every aspect of the business, right? But as much as, I do work with a lot of mob in organisations around strategic leadership, right? Like how do you manage stakeholder engagement? How can you be of support to the business, but also what is it that you need as a leader around influential communication, around strategic planning, around project management, all those type of things, right? Because sometimes we are chucked into, and I do want to talk about RAP working groups, that's all right, Sam, but one of the challenges that I think a lot of organisations have is that they ask for one person to do everything, and and we have to actually look at the skill set and the capability.
Everything with a capital A.
Yeah, and so we need to look at the skill set and the capability and the resources, but also the decision-making power and autonomy that someone has within a business, right? Like a trainee is not going to be telling a CEO what to do.
Totally.
It doesn't work like that.
Absolutely.
It's never worked like that. So don't try to, piss in my pocket and tell me that it's not raining right, because it doesn't work like that.
Definitely.
And so I think looking at, create opportunities for leadership development and influence for your First Nation staff members, but also recognise that your leadership team has a lot of capability that they need to develop as well from a cultural perspective, but also from adapting their communication and their engagement style with people that are from minority populations within a workplace. And you need to recognise those differences. Recognising those differences actually makes you much more influential, compassionate, empathetic and smart leader. And until you recognise that you can't treat everyone the same, or there's not differences that, in approaches to the way that we do engagement and relationship building with our staff, then you'll go nowhere very, very quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. What did you want to dive into around working groups?
The RAP working groups. One of the things that I have noticed in the last, say, 3 years, that I've really been encouraging people organisations to get thinking about their RAP working groups is that they're usually getting people that are passionate. And I love passion.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm vibing with it. You need it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this RAP working group, and you should have those people on your working group, right? But also you need people in your RAP working group that, one, have operational decision-making power and influence from a delegation and accountability perspective, but also you need to be having people a part of your RAP working group that have the skill set and the capability to actually deliver on the action items that sit within the RAP. And I think a lot of people, there might be 15 deliverables, exaggeration, but 15 deliverables related to HR, and yet we have no person from HR or people or culture sitting on the RAP working group, right? How is that deliverable going to be achieved?
Yeah.
It's not, right? And so RAP working groups, from my perspective, need to be focused, need to be operational.
Yep.
Right? Like the same way that we are implementing a procurement policy just in general, right? you don't have someone from marketing or someone from, from people and culture focusing on being a part of the RAP working group, the working group on the procurement policy, right? You have subject matter experts in a particular field. I want you to think about if your business unit's name is next to the deliverable, then you have to actively be participating to understand the broader context of the RAP, but then also know what your little patch of grass is that you need to be watering and what you need to allow to grow. Yeah. Because organisations tend not to, they're committed, they send out an EOI. Who wants to be a part of the RAP working group, which is great, but passion, desire and commitment is not going to achieve a business outcome if we don't have the business leaders who have the say-so about how it is that we handle resources, where we prioritise pieces of work. If that's not there, then the deliverables are not going to be achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think that's such a really valuable and tangible piece of advice for organisations listening that want to go on this journey and, that are forming their working groups, and where do they start. And like you just said, someone will send an email out, and the people that are the most passionate about, that we're vibing with, will put their hands up and jump on those groups. And
like they're the ones that are, buying from Clothing the Gaps, right? They're the ones that are going to the marches. They're the ones that are, I don't know, listening to Jessica Malboy or, watching what's on NITV, right? Like they're the ones that that care about mob when it's not Rec Week, when it's not NAIDOC Week, right? They're the ones that are doing the work all the time. And you need those people because they become really important micro-influencers within the organisation around saying, hey, have you considered this, or here's an opportunity, or have you read this book, here's the latest Anita Heiss book, it was deadly, or, whatever, right? You need those people, but you also then need business leaders to know exactly what they need to do to make this work, right? Because it's an operational document. Most of the time, for a lot of organisations, it's an operational document during significant dates versus being a part of the people culture all the time, which is being a part of the general strategic direction and planning of the business. So we've got to start thinking about how we get the right people involved. And I think the other core point that I just really want to make land is tighten up your terms of reference for your RAP working group and have it more as an operational process versus it being a protocol of this is when we meet, right? There has to be actions and there have to be outcomes, and you have to be implementing performance and monitoring frameworks from a project management perspective. Otherwise, at the end of your RAP time frame, you're going to be chasing your tails to capture all the data, analyse it and then report it. If you keep doing it consistently, right? Like every week, every month, capturing this information, and then you correlate it at the end, that's going to save you much more time. And it's also going to save you stress in terms of getting information. But also, sometimes people leave organisations, right? If you put the pressure, or if one person is leading the RAP and they leave the business, the IP's gone. Yeah. The IP's walked out the door.
That's right.
Right? And so you've got to make sure you get really tight governance processes in place to support the intent of your app. Really, really important. And it's one of the things that is the leak, right? That's why it's a pillar. It's literally a pillar in the RAP governance, right? Working group meetings, collaborations with communities, MOUs, all of those different type of things, right? They're there for a reason. Make sure the RAP framework, it's great. It can be improved, but it serves a purpose. It gives organisations a baseline of what can be done, and it's up to organisations to make it their own, right?
So much knowledge getting dropped here, and it's just a real reflection and testament of your expertise in this sort of space.
I love this work, Sam. There are people, you can see that, right? Like you can see it. I frothing working on RAPs, right? And it's not, a lot of people don't like them, and I get it, because there are a lot of transactional and really awful things that can happen. And there are some organisations that are just tokenistic and gammon dogs, right? Yeah. But then there are also a lot of organisations that do really good work. And I think a best practice is to engage a consultant to give you the support, the advice, the coaching that you need as a leadership team. And you got to find someone that you vibe with, but you also got to find someone that's going to push you past your comfort zone and that can see the things that you don't see. And I love what I do. Sometimes my clients drive me up the wall, and I'm sure I drive them up the wall. You know, I'm not for everyone. Everyone's not for me, that's for sure. But I do love what I do because I think that it does matter and it does have an impact. And, you know, like one of my rap clients, the daughter is coming to interview me for her HSC project. And I'm like, you know, on a weekend, and I'm like, I love this, right? I love the conversation that my client had at the dinner table with their family, to the point now where their daughter has learnt about where I come from. You know, when she sent me the email and asked me to sit down and do an interview with her for a HSC project, it was incredible, the information that she had just found out about me and where I come from and raps and, you know, understanding the referendum. And I just thought, oh my God, this is a 16-year-old kid, right, who's really into it. But raps do have a lot of potential. I love the work that I do. I love the clients that I collaborate with, because I just believe that there is so much more that we can potentially be doing.
I think that's a beautiful example of, you talked about you need to engage a consultant to go on these sorts of journeys with you. But I think it's also about thinking about that engagement as relational as well and not transactional. And I think I wanted to touch on that, but then you sort of really gave that beautiful example of that young person or that client's staff member's daughter engaging you. And I think that that's a really beautiful example that really obviously reinforces your relational way of working with that organisation, with those people there. Because I can think of a few people and a few organisations where that level of connection isn't evident.
Well, it's just all commercial, you know, and there's a lot of good consultants out here, which is great, you know, but also there's a lot of gammon ones. You know, 100%. There's a lot of problematic people, and, you know, I don't mind if that puts a target on my back. That's the facts. That's the facts. There are some consultants and some organisations that do the bare minimum, but there are also some clients that are expecting the bare minimum from the engagement. And and I just don't play that game of transparency. I don't play that game of not having real yarns about the messy shit. Right? Like, I'm not going to take your money and then tell you exactly what you want to hear. It's just not how I'm built. They don't build us like that in Brie.
That's it.
You know, sorry. Bar and Four girls don't. We're not like that, the Bar and Four girls. But I really do. I think best practice from my perspective is to have an independent person to engage with your leadership team and to support you and really build a personal relationship there. Right? Like, I always say to my clients, what can I help you with? What do you want? And then what is it that you need from me, right? And I have good, strong relationships with my clients, like most small businesses do, right? Like, we have that ability to be agile. We have that ability to spend a lot of time with clients. But I think look beyond the commercial agreement and think about how we can build a long-term relationship with, you know, with this person. Like, I still get some clients that ring me up 4 years later and say, Dix needs some help with this. What do you reckon? You know, and I don't charge them. You know, like that stuff is, you know, because that's good. One, I want to help people. I also want to buy my land back. So I've got to make money. But also, what I know about good relationships with clients and doing good work with them is that they'll mention your name in a room full of opportunities. Right? And so I think you want to make sure you have good experiences with your clients and that your clients are having good experiences, because that's really important, because without your clients you have no business, but without your clients you have no impact either.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I'm only one person. There are so many things that I want to contribute to from a perspective of young women starting their own businesses, because I know the power of economic independence and wealth creation of operating my own business. And I think that if we're not focused on, you know, those client experiences, then I don't make money and then I don't invest in community, you know, like what we did with your scholarships last year, right? Like if I wasn't operating a business that was sustainable and also profitable, then I wouldn't have been able to contribute to your community fund last year and send, you know, sister girl to her basketball tournament, you know? Like those those things matter. So it's a circular kind of world, the way that RAPs work.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing's pretty clear. Obviously, you're an expert in the RAP space.
I'm not an expert. Stop saying that.
It's pretty clear. You're a LinkedIn top voice, so I'll keep saying that. But look,
stop saying that.
Clearly, your expertise don't stop with RAPs.
My experience.
Your experience doesn't.
I'm
stop
so uncomfortable when you say that. I feel so uncomfortable when people say
LinkedIn's claimed you. You got the badge on your profile. You're there now.
Give me a job then, LinkedIn, you dogs.
Give us a contract there,
you big
LinkedIn.
Dumb dogs.
But beyond the RAPs, you know, cultural capability, engagement. You're clearly a strategic thinker. You clearly have all that ability to be able to operate in that space and at that level. Are you delivering services in those worlds? What does the future look like for Nganya? Will it always just be RAPs? I can imagine you can do a range of other sort of things for clients and for the sector. I know you've got iCulture 360. You might want to yarn about some of that sort of stuff. But yeah, what do you reckon?
So I think, you know, when I first started business, and I yarned to you about this, right? Like I had $76 when I started, and I would do anything that anyone needed me to do, right? Like if you said, can you wash my car? I'll be like, yeah, bruh. I'm the best car wash person you ever seen in your life. I'm better than, you know, magic car, you know, the car wash drive-through. Like I would do anything that I needed to survive, right? Because I needed to replace my income and I needed to live, right? I got bills to pay like everyone else. And then I evolved into doing some stakeholder engagement project, and then I found my groove with RAPs, and I feel like I'm very good at doing what needs to be done with organisations around RAPs. But one of the projects that I've been working on in the last 6 months is, or 6 to 9 months, is a cultural capability training program called iCulture 360. Mm-hmm. And I just felt that I like working with people, and I like training and having conversations and building the skill sets and presenting different information to people and supporting people to do their critical self-reflection. And so I developed iCulture 360 with the focus on the individual being the I, culture being First Nations culture, and in terms of understanding what that is, and the 360 being leadership development for you as the individual, right? So that's how it is, iCulture 360. Mm-hmm. And the core components of iCulture 360 is looking at what political experiences shape social outcomes in Aboriginal communities. The second element of it is how do we effectively build relationships with First Nations communities. And the third element of it is how do we critically construct and effectively construct conversations about racism, anti-racism and allyship in this country. And also reconciliation. And the fourth component of the framework is looking at what is the core business of an organisation. So if it's aged care, or if it's nursing, or if it's building, whatever it might be, I want to work with organisations to develop what are the key themes of cultural capability that you need in your organisations to be a culturally sound, relevant and respectful organisation, right? Okay. There are so many cultural capability training and awareness training programs that are really great out here, but I think some miss the mark in terms of building the skill set and the capability for people to actually put things into practice. So I have now just taken to market iCulture 360, which I'm really excited about, and I think it's got the potential to move people past awareness and education to practical implementation around, if someone says something racist, then this is how I handle that conversation. And it's not about attacking the person; it's about deconstructing the position or the concept or the thought of this person. And we've got to do that in a really effective way from a verbal and non-verbal perspective, in a way that makes people not put up their walls automatically and tell you to piss off, right? Or just, say to you, oh, you're part of the woke culture, or whatever, right? You're just telling me I'm wrong, like whatever, go away, Karen, right?
Totally.
And so I think the iCulture 360, I believe, will make a mark and have an impact in the space, and it's going to be complementary to the work that I do with organisations around the RAP. This is, once again, that extension of what implementation looks like, right? Like, what does the infrastructure in the business look like, and what do we provide? What educational opportunities and experiences do we provide to our staff to build their capability to actually do this versus just looking at, sending people to do, 90-minute session or an online module, right? So,
definitely.
Yeah, entering the market around cultural capability training.
How do we access it?
Just check out my website.
It's available online?
Yeah, it is.
Is it in-person training, online program?
So it's an online program.
Online program.
And so I've got my modules, my 4 core modules that are written, and then I will work with your organisation about what you want to be included in your specific module, right? So I think there are foundational modules, right? The core modules, and then the additional core module is the one that you think is relevant to your work and what you want your staff to make, what you want your staff to know, right? So rather than buying off-the-shelf online program or having a licensing fee every year. You buy the program from me once off, we get it produced, we give you access to the modules. Your module is recorded and produced, and then you have that, and that's your one-off. That's it.
Great.
Right?
I love that.
I think, Sam, it's a bit of a disruption in the market, to be honest, from the respect that it's not, I don't want to sell licenses. A smart commercial decision, in all honesty, would be sustained profitability and selling licenses every year. But for me, I want sustained progress, right? And I know organisations don't necessarily have unlimited budgets for their RAP, right? So for me, it's a smarter commercial decision to spend a one-off payment on or a charge to cultural capability training that I can then have for the next 3 to 5 years and do a refresher, or maybe there's something else that our organisation might need. So there's the online modules, and then I also deliver 90-minute sessions, half-day sessions, and then a full-day session for a leadership team if that's wanted. So, but yeah, I would love to talk to organisations about the program, and I'm really excited about it. Like, I've had so much fun building it. I think it's going to be good.
I think what's really unique about it is that piece around how you actually partner and work with the organisation to develop that fourth piece. The fourth piece.
Well, we have to, right? Because I don't know the ins and outs of your company. You don't know the ins and outs of my lived experience, but also my educational experience, right? And what I know works and what I know doesn't work, and what doesn't work. And there's no, I just don't vibe with off the shelf
not
stuff.
at all.
I just
Absolutely.
If you're spending $80,000 on cultural capability training, if I'm spending $80,000 on something, I want like tailored. I really do. Like, I want tailored content, and I want to know that the trainer sitting across from me gets my people. And I get her people, or or his people, or their people, right? Like, I want there to make sure. I want this to be a good relationship, where we both understand what our needs and aspirations are as a collaboration. Like, this is a collaborative piece, right?
I love that. Really strong values come through when you talk about the integrity of this piece of work, and the impact that this sort of work can have. Particularly when you talk about, not going down a licensing path as opposed to going down approach path like this, in terms of the actual relationships that you build, the impact that you have, and how meaningful the training and the work ends up actually being when you go through a process like this.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time on it, Sam, from writing it to developing it. And, in all honesty, like, I put my heart and my soul into this piece of work. And it's not been something that I just developed in the last 9 months. It's been something that I've deeply thought about from my days of going through respecting the difference at New South Wales Health and those cultural capability or cultural awareness training programs. And I've just needed to be in the right headspace to bring something deadly to the market. And I'm telling you, like, this program, it's fucking neat, right? Like it's not long. It's short, it's punchy, it's intentional, it's outcomes focused, and I'm like, I'm obviously mad on it because I did it, but I just think it's it's not like a big launch thing either, like I'm not going out and I'm just slowly talking to people, like the people that will know about it now will be because it'll be on the podcast, right? Like people will eventually come to me and and find out about it. But I'm excited about it, but I'm also chilled and very calm.
Yeah.
And when you, when some people hype something up because they just want to sell it.
Totally.
Like this game-changing, opportunity for organisations will elevate your leadership. Mm-hmm. That's what it will do. It will get you to critically self-reflect on your individual lived experiences and perspectives, but it will also build your capability to recognise that there's a whole different world out here. There's these two worldviews sitting right alongside of each other, and one's not right and one's not wrong. They're just different, right? Yeah. And we just have to work out how it is that we see them both equally, respectfully, engaging and lovingly and honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm pumped for it. So
yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, but the amount of cultural capability training or resources that I've come across in my journey that's just been so either culturally inappropriate or just absolutely not fit for purpose has been too often than not. So I think what you're doing is going to add so much value.
But I think, there's a lot of providers that have done real deadly stuff.
Absolutely.
And there are some things that I've seen that are amazing, Cherie Johnson speaking in colour. Amazing, I've heard so many good things about her work and Flick Ryan.
I've heard good stuff about
deadly work that Flick does, and they're tiny, they're small, bespoke female leaders that are really connected to community and really connected to the intent and the purpose of their work, and not just a matter of, again, there's a lot of providers out there, but I just, I think it's time to also lead differently, right?
Yeah.
There's there's plenty of ways to do this work, and I think we've got to adapt because the landscape has changed post-referendum around cultural capability. Yeah.
Absolutely. Conscious of time, but you touched on a little bit earlier about some of the stuff that we did together with Spark Impact, the scholarship stuff that we did together.
That's what
it's called. Yeah. So I want to acknowledge and thank your generosity, for funding the scholarships that you provided. So
no worries.
For people listening, they would know that that scholarship fund is a collection of Black businesses and entrepreneurs that are passionate about reinvesting our wealth back into our communities and us self-determining our philanthropic agendas. And thanks so much for being a part of that.
No worries.
But I was also listening on the way down on some of the yarns that I was hearing, and you were talking about some of the things that you'd funded throughout your journey. So I know that the stuff that we've done together isn't the first time that you've been a part of having an impact through Neganya and through your journey professionally. I was just wondering if you might be able to share any of the impact that you've been able to have for our people as a result of your success and impact professionally.
I donate to the charities that I really care about.
Yeah.
I really care about Kinchela Boys Home a lot. So I've always donated to that charity and that organisation.
You have connections? But
yeah, and it's important to, for our old uncles and, big brothers and cousins and, for us to care about them and just support them with what they need, right?
Absolutely.
Also, really care about the Older Women's Network,
Yeah.
which is another charity that's based in New South Wales, and give to that. And the Glen on Central Coast. So there's organisations that I care about that I, regularly donate my money to, that I earn, because it's that circular economy, right? Like, you give what you can and you share with what you have. That's how our communities operate.
Totally.
But I think, business for me as time has gone on, business has created so many opportunities for me, not just from the perspective of, my living situation. When I first started, it wasn't great, and I started with $76, and now I live, in a nice place that I love, and I, the roof on my head, over my head, it makes me feel safe and comfortable and, looked after, and I have that autonomy and independence, and I do spend a lot of time, like, I always give business tips on Instagram, I'm sitting up there on the couch just randomly talking about stuff. But I think, giving back is really important, and it doesn't have to be with money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can just be with time, right? Like sharing information, sharing your expertise, sitting on boards, or being a part of community programs, or volunteering with the PCYC. Like, one of the things that I really cared about was I lived in Dubbo for a lot of years, and there was a cop there that I met many, many years ago, Burnsy, and when I first moved to Dubbo, anyway, well, there was one night, right, like, I've bit of a rough sleeper a few times in my life, and one time I was sleeping in my car after rugby training there, and he saw me and he said, what's going on here? And I was like, I just camped in here for the night, and the next day, he found me a house, I moved in with a couple of police officers, and just really helped me at that point. So I've always given back to the PCYC, because I knew that's where, that was the beginning of a really good start for me in life, and set me up for the next, 5 years of going to uni and having a couple of jobs and being able to be economically independent and look after myself. And I got my own place and all those type of things. So I think over the years, I've just been able to, reflecting on those experiences that you have and not forgetting where you come from and who helped you along the way, and giving back to those people in the way that you can is really important. Like, I'm just about to pay my mum's house off, which is, I love that feeling.
It's amazing.
I love those feelings. And that's why I really encourage, Mob to be thinking about economic development and opportunities that come to you, whether it's negotiating a salary or saying yes to something that you might normally say no to out of fear of failing or fear of, not working out for you. But have a go at those things, because on the other side of your fear and your anxiety of something not working for you is so much more possibility and potential.
Totally.
And I love that I work in business, because working with business and collaborating with some of the clients that I do on really decent contracts means that I can give back in the way that feels right to me and the way that I know makes an impact. And that's one of the, biggest beauties of being an Aboriginal business, right, and the Indigenous procurement policy in this country, is that we get to decide what we give back to and when and how it is that we make that impact.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a beautiful story around those earlier years for you, and I know that you do a lot. I remember you making a trip out to Mildura and doing some stuff at one of the camps out there with the Young Women's program out there. I know you've done different stuff as well as the stuff that you've funded with me, and thanks for sharing that story around sleeping rough and that sort of stuff. Obviously,
who you are, Sam. Like, people, I'm a big personality, and people have will have a set opinion about me without even knowing who the fuck I am.
Yeah,
right. Would never having a yarn to me and being like, Dix, where'd you come from? What did you experience in life? What's made you who you are today? And I think, I post a lot on LinkedIn, like most people, they post the highlights, right? On Instagram, that's where I post the, the cluster. But, I think because I do talk a lot about wealth creation, I'm really committed to that, Sam. Like, I'm really committed to being a person that is out in the front. Like, I'm not by any means loaded, right? Like, but I got enough to make myself and look after not just myself. You know, I just gave my brother, and I'm not gloating about this either, but these are yarns that, you know, me, you and Ness and people are having, right? Like
100%.
if we don't start talking about money and we don't start having a different conversation about the potential of wealth and opportunity that comes from wealth creation and prosperity, then it just forever is going to be taboo in our country, you know. Like my brother got married last month, and Sam, I can't tell you how much it meant for me to give him $10,000 as a gift for a wedding, you know, or what it means to pay my mum's house off, you know. Like, my mum's worked 2 jobs for as long as I can remember, and she's always looked after everyone. And so being able to do that is a game changer, right? Like, in a game changer, because you're like, if I keep working this hard and I keep holding my nerve in negotiations with clients around contracts, and if I keep stretching myself and doing what I need to do, then my family's going to be set.
Yeah.
And not set in the way of like living a big, you know, lush life. Like, I just want my mum to be debt free. And I just want my brother to be like, we're right to keep moving. Like, we're not in debt now from our wedding, and we can keep moving forward with me and my wife, Alex. And, you know, they can live that life and go on the holidays that they want, and hopefully give me beautiful nieces and nephews soon, and hopefully name one of them after me, just saying, because, you know, but not my government name. But, you know, like that's the stuff that money does create. And I think we've got to really start yarning about the potential of what money does for us in our communities. And I cop a lot of flack for that. But you know what? I don't care.
I love it.
You know, because the yarn's got to change. The yarn's got to change about, you know, because if you're not making money, you can't give to the things that you care about. You can't look after your people. You can't give back to community. You can't put petrol in your car.
Totally.
You can't buy a loaf of bread. Like, a loaf of bread is $6. I went to buy one yesterday and it was $5.30.
Yeah.
You know, like it's the cost of living is ridiculous in this country. Like, it's wild. So anyway, just an encouragement to people is to, you know, to start thinking about looking after yourself and looking after your community when you can look after them from a money perspective, because it's tough, right? Like, you and I know what it's like to have 100%. Nothing, you know.
What would you tell? So, you know, your journey professionally started quite young. You mentioned that you were 17, 18 when you first started working, and the trajectory that you've gone on. But I imagine that there's probably a lot of Aboriginal young professionals, young women that are going to listen to this episode and, you know, look up to you as someone who's a bit further along on the journey than they are, and maybe see a bit of themselves in you. Do you have advice for yourself back at the earlier stages of your journey for them that they could take listening now?
You know, I have no regrets, in all honesty. For some reason, actually not for some reason, I know why, my grandmother and my aunties and my big cousins led the way for me. You know, like, I saw some I'm definitely a product of my family and my community, right? Like, women from Brie are formidable, very determined, very focused, very committed to any goal that is set for people, and they negotiate and they manage relationships really, really well, because I've seen that growing up in community working party meetings, right, where you've seen, you know, your aunties and your uncles negotiating with government officials about what will and won't be done in communities from a service delivery perspective. So I see that, you know, from a kid's age, right? From 6, 7. Like, one of my earliest memories was at 7 at an AECG meeting, right? Like, I would go along with my nan to those meetings, and so I think the advice is do everything without the fear of any regret. And say yes to the things that you would normally say no to because of your fear of failure. Another thing is definitely to embrace failure, because it is inevitable. No one ever succeeded without failing 25 times before. That's the reality of it, right? Like, I haven't found my way in business by always being successful or always winning. I continue to win because of all of my losses. And I think the final point is probably know your value from the perspective of both your values-based leadership, right? Like know what you will and won't stand for, but then also know your monetary value in any form of negotiation with someone, whether it be a business transaction or a salary negotiation with an employer. Know your values and make sure that your values align with the monetary value that someone is putting forward to you as an option. And you don't always have to say yes to what people offer you, right? Like you don't have to accept the bare minimum standard. You get to define that as an individual. So
beautiful. I think that there's been so much in our yarn for listeners to be able to take away from, whether it's that young professional who's looking for advice and guidance on their own journey, whether it's non-Aboriginal allies and change makers, whether it's senior leaders in national organisations looking to have an impact. I think you've been able to really tease out some critical nuggets for people to reflect on, to take away, and hopefully take some action on. If for the small chance someone listening to this isn't connected with you or hasn't come across you yet, where do they go?
You go on like everyone would know who I am, Sam.
I know. Everyone knows.
There's a lot of people that...
You reckon?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Of course.
Well, where do they go? If this is the first time someone's come across?
Yeah, if you want to follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn, that's probably the main platform where I share a lot of information about RAPs and cultural capability training. Dixie Crawford, not Lisa Crawford, my government name.
Yeah.
But also if you want to check, you can also follow me. If you want to work with me, then definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn or over at our website, or you can email me at hello@nganya.com.au, nganya.com.au. But also, lots of yarns I have about the rap space on TikTok and on Instagram. So,
okay. Yeah,
Black
great.
Businesswoman on Instagram.
Black Businesswoman on Instagram.
Businesswoman.
That's your handle. And look, honestly, LinkedIn, I'm connected with, probably thousands of people there. And I would say that in terms of the content that you produce on there, it really adds a lot of value. The podcasts that you share, the videos, the resources. You've got a newsletter that people can subscribe to there.
Well, I didn't until you told me about it. But what about when you had like 200 people on it and then you're like, just start doing it. And then it went to like 1,000 people.
Yeah, beautiful. That's it.
I never would have started a newsletter unless you told me.
That's the power of the top voice, eh?
There you go.
Over 1,000 in a day.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Shame.
But honestly, like in terms of you've clearly gone deep around so much different stuff. But if people want to know more, follow you on LinkedIn. There's a plethora of free resources that continue to reinforce it.
Look, and I spend a lot of time creating content for LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok and my podcast because I want to be able to. The content that I create is always about you providing an opportunity to get new information and alternative ideas, right, and to be curious about it. And so I'm very particular, very curated about what it is that we put forward because I want the content that I share on LinkedIn to be a helpful resource for you, a place for you to go and learn and see new information, because I think on social media for a lot of people it is, like, oh, I just got this work or we've been traveling here or that kind of stuff. I don't give a about that stuff. What I care about is knowing what your level, what your experience is, what skill set you've got and how you can help me solve my problems. So I can help you solve your problems around reconciliation action plans and cultural capability and engagement with mob, right? Like that's what and I have pillars of my content that I share every single week, but I think that I think if you are following people on LinkedIn or on any social media platform in this space, there are so many deadly people that are doing good work out there. Just make sure you go looking for the free information that's available, right? By the time a client has come to me, they already know who I am. They know a lot about the work that we do. They know about our approach because the content that we consistently pump out in my team is focused on building people's understanding of how we can help them, but also we understand the problems that they've got, and sometimes people don't even recognise some of the challenges that they've got in front of them, and that's the power of using social media platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok, I find.
Definitely.
So,
People know where they can find you, and it's just been really good to catch up and have a yarn, and look forward to coming back here on Country and catching up again in the future too. So thank you again.
thanks, brother.
Cheers.